If quiet Christmas stories about people who have everything on paper, but nothing that really feels like home, make your heart ache in the best way, stay with this one until the very end. And if Claire, Timothy's, Ethan, and little Sophie's snowy journey stirs something in you, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next slow, healing story on this channel. By the week before Christmas, Manhattan glowed like it was trying to outshine the stars. White lights wrapped every tree trunk along the avenue. Department stores spilled gold out onto the sidewalks. Carolers in coordinated scarves huddled at street corners, their voices rising above the hum of traffic for a few brief, bright seconds at a time. Inside the glass tower that housed Summer's studio, the world was even brighter. The company's holiday party pulsed with music and low laughter. Strings of lights looped around chrome columns. Champagne flutes flashed in people's hands like tiny, temporary trophies. Claire Summers stood near the bar, fingers wrapped around the stem of a glass she'd only taken 2 sips from. Her burgundy suit fit like it had been sewn directly onto her architect's sharp. No excess. Her blonde hair was twisted into a perfect knot at the nape of her neck. She had built the firm from an empty Google Doc and a rented desk to this. Clients across the country trusted her taste. Magazines asked for interviews. Blogs called her the woman who made minimalism warm again. She knew how to do success. Home was harder. Still single? Still stubborn? A familiar voice teased. Claire turned. Nina Park slid into the space beside her, balancing 2 sugar cookies on a napkin. Her dark hair was tucked behind one ear. Her dress was green and fearless. "You know blind dates aren't illegal," Nina said, handing over a cookie. "They should be," Claire replied. "Right up there with scented pine cones in office lobbies." "This one's for charity," Nina countered. "Holiday Hearts Initiative, completely anonymous. All proceeds help foster kids get a real Christmas." Claire took a dry sip of champagne. "I already make donations," she said. "Without putting myself through dinner with a stranger who thinks interior designer means I pick out throw pillows." Nina leaned on the bar, unbothered. "This isn't about dating," she said. "It's about doing one thing this year that you can't predict or schedule to death. You hate unpredictable." "I know. That's why I'm serious." Claire raised a brow. "How serious?" Nina's grin turned dangerous. "If you say no," she said, "you owe me a weekend in Vermont. No laptop, no spreadsheets, no site visits, just pine trees, bad cell phone reception, and conversations." "That sounds like torture," Claire said. "Exactly," Nina replied. "So take the blind date. Worst case, it's awkward and you go home. Best case," she shrugged, "maybe it surprises you." Claire didn't answer right away. She looked around at the people she'd hired, mentored, built an empire beside. They admired her. They listened when she spoke. They copied her outfits and her email signatures. None of them knew what kind of tea helped her sleep. None knew she couldn't fall asleep without music playing low in another room, a habit from childhood nights in apartments that never felt safe. "Fine," she said at last. "But if he shows up in a novelty Christmas tie, I'm leaving." Nina clapped once, delighted. "The rules are simple," she said. "You bring an old leather-bound book. He'll have a red scarf, the date is in Maple Hollow." "Maple what?" Claire interrupted. "Tiny town upstate," Nina said. "Snow. Trees. The whole snow globe package. That's where your match is from. Holiday Hearts likes to do it on the hometown turf." Claire exhaled. "Of course they do," she muttered. "One more thing," Nina added. "Clause in the program. If you back out or don't show, you have to visit your match's town in person on Christmas Eve. No laptop, no work. You have to show up and apologize like a real human." Claire narrowed her eyes. "You made that up," she said. Nina held up her phone, flashing an email. "I wish," she said. "Come on." Summers. Live dangerously. One evening, one book, one red scarf. Claire looked at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lights blinked in other towers. Parties she wasn't invited to. Parties she could have been at if she'd chosen a different life. Or the same. "Fine," she said again. I'll go. Nina squealed. Bring your prettiest old book, she said. Try not to terrify him. And maybe, just for one night, pretend the world won't end if you don't check your email. Hundreds of miles away, snow fell more softly. The town of Maple Hollow was the kind of place people in the city bought calendars of Main Street. Old bricks, lampposts wrapped in garlands, windows glowing against the early dark. On the corner of Maple and 3rd, a sign above a brick storefront read Ward's Books and Brew. Inside, the smell of coffee and cinnamon clung to the air like a comforting hand on the shoulder. Ethan Ward flipped the closed sign and locked the door. His hands were ink-smudged from stocking used novels. His sweater smelled faintly of roasting beans. Daddy! A small voice called. He turned. Sophie stood in the middle of the shop, pink tulle dress flaring around her legs, a crayon clutched in her fist. A piece of paper was pressed to her chest. Can I hang this now? She asked. Ethan crouched to her level. Let me see, he said. She turned the drawing around. 3 figures stood beneath a Christmas tree. One tall, with brown hair scribbled in quick strokes. One small, in a pink cloud of a dress. One with a waterfall of yellow hair and a red dress that swooshed all the way to the drawn-on floor. Who's that? He asked, pointing at the 3rd. Sophie's fingers tightened on the paper. The Christmas lady, she whispered. So she sees it when she comes. Yeah, Ethan asked gently. What will she bring? Sophie frowned in concentration. Not presents, she said. Just warm. Something ached in his chest. Rachel had been gone 4 years. The bookstore cafe had been her dream. Now it was their refuge. He lifted the drawing carefully. Let's put her on the mantel, he said. Good art deserves a good spot. Later that evening, his cousin Julia breezed in, cheeks pink from the cold and mischief. You're signed up? She announced, waving her phone. For what? Ethan asked warily. The Holiday Hearts Initiative, she said. I entered you before you could say no. Jules, he groaned. I'm not ready for... Maybe it's not about being ready, she said, her voice softening. Maybe it's about being open. He thought of Sophie's drawing on the mantel. I'll go, he said at last. One coffee, no promises. Julia's grin brightened the whole shop. The Hollow Bean sat between a flower boutique and a tiny gift shop, its windows fogged, its sign written in soft cursive. Claire arrived 5 minutes early, because of course she did. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching the small leather-bound book Nina had made her bring. It smelled faintly of paper and cedar. Her grandmother had read from it when she was small. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Snow had started, a tentative dusting that softened the edges of the street. Inside, the coffee shop was all warm wood and ambient light. A fire crackled in a corner fireplace. A handful of customers sat scattered around, reading or murmuring over mugs. Her eyes scanned for a red scarf. She saw him near the back, broad shoulders and a dark sweater. A deep red scarf draped over the chair beside him. He was flipping through a notebook, occasionally sipping from a mug, absolutely not checking his phone. He looked steady, grounded, not at all like the slick, performative type she'd braced for. Her stomach did a small, unfamiliar flip. Before she could take a step toward his table, her phone buzzed. Contractor issue. Riverside project urgent. She stared at the notification. Not now. She slid the phone back into her coat pocket. It buzzed again. This time, it lit up with her project manager's name. Her jaw clenched. She could ignore it. For once in her life, she could let someone else handle it. The phone buzzed again, insistent. She exhaled sharply and stepped back outside, the bell above the door chiming in protest. Cold slapped her cheeks as she answered. What's wrong, she said. 15 minutes later, her voice was hoarse from issuing commands. She had rerouted a shipment, smoothed over a panicking client, and walked someone through an on-site fix while standing by a lamppost in a town she did not know. When she finally turned back toward the warm windows, the table near the back was empty. The red scarf was gone. Inside, the man she might have met had already left. At a table near the fire, a little girl in a pink dress balanced on her knees on a chair, watching snow slide down the window. Her dad had stepped away to grab napkins. She saw something white on the floor by a chair, a glove. Slightly too small for most people here, just right for a woman with careful hands. She climbed down, picked it up with both hands like it might break. When her father returned, she tugged his sleeve. "She dropped this," she said solemnly. "Who did he ask?" "The lady with the yellow hair," Sophie whispered. She had magic in her eyes. "You saw her?" Ethan asked. Sophie nodded. "I think she's my Christmas lady," she said. He looked toward the door. It had already closed behind Claire. Snow fell harder. He looked back at his daughter, then at the glove in her hand. "Well," he said softly, "if she's meant to come back, maybe she will." The blind date had failed. Claire told herself that meant she was free. Technically, she had shown up. She had walked into the cafe. She had just walked back out before anything could start. Nina disagreed. "Fine print," she said, waving the holiday hearts email on Claire's screen. "If you don't actually meet your match, you owe them an in-person apology in their hometown. On Christmas Eve, no laptop, no work." "I stepped inside," Claire said. "That counts." "You took a crisis call and vanished," Nina countered. "That doesn't count." Claire pressed her fingers to her temples. "I have a company to run," she said. "You have a life to live," Nina replied. "And for the record, you didn't even give the universe 10 minutes to try." Claire stared at the screen. The terms of the program blinked back at her. "I can't just drive to some snow town because I missed a coffee date," she said. "Watch you," Nina said. You promise? And maybe you need to remember who you are when you're not saving everyone else's projects." The logic was terrible. The feeling underneath it was worse. For the past few weeks, Claire had been moving through her days like a simulacrum of herself. She answered emails. She signed contracts. She attended meetings in which people said her name as if it were a brand, not a person. At night, when the city lights glittered outside her floor-to-ceiling windows, she sat on her immaculate sofa and listened to a silence that sounded less like peace and more like absence. "I'll go," she heard herself say. "Christmas Eve, I'll drive up, apologize, come back. Then you and your dare can leave me alone." Nina's smile was too gentle to be called a smirk. "Deal," she said. The snow came down heavier than the forecast had promised. By the time Claire left the highway and turned onto the smaller road that wound toward Maple Hollow, her wipers were losing the fight. The world ahead was a tunnel of swirling white. Her rental car rattled unhappily over packed snow. "This is not how Hallmark movies make it look," she muttered, leaning forward. Her GPS had already recalculated twice. Street signs were vague shadows. If she didn't know better, she would have thought the road was trying to disappear under her. A warning light blinked on the dashboard. Her stomach dropped. "Don't you dare," she told the car. It sputtered. On the next bend, the engine coughed once, then died. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Claire sat there, hands locked on the wheel, breath fogging the windshield. "Perfect," she said. She pulled on her coat, grabbed her small overnight bag, and stepped out into the cold. Snow bit at her ankles, finding every gap in her boots. Wind pushed at her shoulders. Most of the buildings along the street were dark. Shuttered shops, houses with curtains drawn and lights low. But across the road, a soft amber glow spilled from the windows of a small brick building. A wooden sign above the door read, "Ward's Books and Brew. Warmth. Light. A chance not to freeze." She crossed the street carefully, her breath visible in the air. Her right hand was bare. Her left wore a single white glove. Its mate had vanished weeks ago on a night she tried not to think about. She knocked. The door opened slowly. A man stood there, framed in firelight and the smell of coffee. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sweater the color of pine bark. His brown hair fell over his forehead in a way that should have looked careless, but somehow didn't. His expression was cautious. Then it shifted to surprise. On the step stood a woman with golden hair dusted in snow, cheeks flushed from the cold, one gloved hand clutching a strap of her bag. "Hi," she said, her breath clouded between them. "My car broke down. I'm supposed to be meeting someone nearby, but I think I'm lost. And very cold." Over his shoulder, a small voice piped up. "Daddy, who is it?" A little girl in a pink tulle dress peeked around his leg, clutching a drawing. He glanced down at her, then back at the woman on the step. "You'd better come in," he said. The Bookshop café felt like stepping into the inside of a story. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with titles. A small fireplace crackled in the corner, its light picking out the worn leather of armchairs. A counter ran along one side with a chalkboard menu in tidy handwriting. It smelled like cinnamon and old pages. "I'm Ethan," he said, gesturing toward a chair near the fire. "Claire," she replied. "Thank you for rescuing me from hypothermia." "No bother," he said. "Not every day a stranger appears on my doorstep on Christmas Eve." The little girl climbed into the armchair across from Claire, still holding her drawing. Her dark eyes studied their guest very carefully. "You look like her," she said. "Like who?" Claire asked. Sophie turned the paper around. 3 figures under a Christmas tree. One tall, one small and pink, one with bright yellow hair in a red dress. "That's beautiful," Claire said honestly. "That's you," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "You're my Christmas lady." Ethan coughed, clearly embarrassed. "Sorry," he said. "She has a strong imagination." "It's okay," Claire said. No one had ever drawn her into a family before. Ethan handed her a mug. "Cocoa," he said. "House rule, anyone who walks in from a snowstorm gets cocoa." Claire wrapped both hands round the mug, grateful for the heat. "This place," she said after a moment, eyes traveling over the shelves. "It's kind of magical." "Sometimes it is," he replied. Sophie leaned her head against the armchair, eyelids drooping, but her gaze never left Claire's face. Claire took a sip of cocoa. It was richer than anything she'd ordered in the city. Not because of the ingredients, but because of the context: quiet room, crackle of fire, Christmas music low in the background, a child's drawings taped to the mantel. She had not realized how starved she was for simple warmth until now. The guest room upstairs was simple but thoughtful. Soft linens, an extra blanket folded at the foot of the bed, a small lamp casting golden light across a nightstand scarred by years of coffee cups and paperbacks. Claire ran her fingers over the quilt. She couldn't remember the last time someone had prepared a space for her that wasn't part of a design proposal or a hotel booking, a room that existed just for rest, not for show. "Hope this works for the night," Ethan said from the doorway. "It's not the Ritz, but it's warm." "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. Downstairs, dinner was simple tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches browned in a cast-iron pan, and a plate of snowflake cookies frosted within an inch of their lives. "I let Sophie handle the decorations," Ethan said. "I can tell," Claire replied, laughing softly at the mountain of red sprinkles on one. "That one's yours," Sophie announced, pointing. Over dinner, Sophie's talked more than Claire expected, about her favorite Christmas movie, about how her dad made snowflake pancakes when it snowed, about how the Christmas lady in her drawings always wore red. "Why red?" Claire asked gently. "So Daddy sees her," Sophie said. "He always notices red." Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Claire pretended not to notice the way his shoulders tightened for a moment, then eased. Later, when Sophie had run off to get another drawing, Ethan set down his glass. "She's been drawing you for weeks," he said quietly. "Me?" Claire asked. "Not you specifically," he corrected. "A woman with yellow hair who wears a red dress and shows up for Christmas. That's how she imagines her mom, if she came back." Claire's chest pulled tight. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shook his head. "Don't be," he said. "Rachel died 4 years ago. Car accident in a storm a lot like this. I left photography not long after. Couldn't live in chaos anymore. So I came back here, opened the shop, raised Sophie on stories and cocoa and schedules. She's lucky," Claire said. "I'm the lucky one," he replied. The fire crackled. For a moment, silence settled, not empty, not awkward, just full. Claire took another sip of cocoa. "I think I forgot what this feels like," she admitted. "What does?" he asked. She gestured vaguely. "A quiet Christmas," she said. "A warm room. People." He didn't press. He didn't ask about her office or the skyline. He just listened. It was unnerving. It was also Nice. Later, in the guest room, Claire lay awake and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked in the ordinary way of buildings that had seen more winters than she had. Downstairs, the faint hum of the fireplace reached her through the floorboards. On the nightstand, Sophie's drawing lay where Claire had set it down. Three figures. A tree, a red dress. She picked it up, held it closer. The crayon lines were wobbly, but the intention was clear. She had been written into someone's wish before she'd even knocked on the door. She swallowed. She had spent years designing beautiful spaces for other people's lives. She could walk into an empty apartment and see where the light would fall at 10 in the morning, how the furniture should flow, where the tree should go at Christmas. She had never once pictured herself in those rooms. The thought drifted in like snow, quiet and persistent. What if she shut it down? She was here for one night because of a dare, because of an obligation to a stranger she had stood up without meaning to. She would leave in the morning. The roads would open. The city and all her responsibilities would still be there. The sensible thing was to enjoy the warm bed, the safe walls, and forget how it felt when a little girl had leaned against her and said, "You're my Christmas lady." She turned off the lamp. The drawing on the nightstand glowed faintly in the leftover light. Ethan stayed downstairs after she went to bed. He stacked the dishes, wiped the table, restocked the small pastry case for the morning after Christmas, when people would wander in with gift cards and books to return. On a chair by the fire, Claire had left her leather-bound book. He picked it up. The cover was worn smooth at the edges. He opened it carefully. An old novel, margins filled with faint pencil notes. On the inside cover, two sets of initials, one in adult handwriting, one in a child's careful imitation. Something slipped out and fell to the floor. He bent to pick it up. It was a folded card from Holiday Hearts Initiative. The logo smiled up at him from cheap, festive cardstock. He exhaled. Of course, he murmured. Julia had told him his match would be someone very New York who had to bring an old book. He had waited at the hollow bean with his red scarf and his doubts. He had seen a blur of blonde hair, a coat, a woman moving toward the door. Then he had waited 15 more minutes. Then he had gone home, convincing himself it was for the best. Now the same woman was asleep in his guest room, her daughter's drawing on the nightstand. He could have woken her up to say so. He could have knocked on her door and said, "Surprise? We were supposed to meet weeks ago under better lighting." Instead, he tucked the card back into the book and set it on the mantel. Some beginnings did better without names attached. In the morning, the world outside the windows had turned white and gold. The snow had softened into a thick, clean blanket. The sky was a pale blue strip above the trees. Light poured into the kitchen. Claire padded down the stairs, hair tousled around her shoulders, wearing the same sweater and jeans as the night before. Something about the way she moved slower, less braced for impact, made Ethan look twice. "Morning," she said, voice husky with sleep. "Hope you're hungry," he said. "It's a house rule. Snow means snowflake pancakes." Sophie bounced in her chair at the table, already in her pink dress and mismatched socks. "Daddy makes them when it snows," she announced. "It's the law." Claire laughed softly. "Is that so?" she asked. "It is now," Ethan said, flipping a pancake that looked vaguely like a star but would pass for a snowflake in the right light. He poured coffee without asking how she liked it. She took a sip, paused, and looked at him. "That's exactly right," she said. "Lucky guess," he replied, though he knew it wasn't luck. He had noticed what she'd taken at dinner, how she'd sweetened it, how she'd sipped. They ate quietly. Conversation laced through with Sophie's questions. "Do you believe in Santa?" Sophie asked. "Professionally or personally?" Claire asked. "Both," Sophie said. "I believe in people who try their best to be kind," Claire said. "The rest I'm still figuring out." Sophie seemed satisfied with that answer. After breakfast, music drifted in from a small speaker on the counter, soft piano versions of classic carols. Sophie danced in the living room, twirling until she was dizzy. Claire helped rinse plates. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of this." "You're welcome," Ethan said. "I'm glad you were close enough to knock." Her smile faded a little. "I didn't just randomly break down here," she said. I was coming to Maple Hollow to meet someone. I stood up. He nodded. I figured, he said. You did, she asked. He tipped his head toward the book on the mantel. I may have seen a card or two, he said. She flushed. I'm sorry, she said. At the coffee shop, I meant to walk over. My phone, life, he said simply. It happens. For what it's worth, I'm glad we met here instead. She looked at him for a long moment. So am I, she said. Well, the roads began to clear by early afternoon. A plow rumbled past. Cars moved cautiously on the street. The world beyond the shop tugged at her again, the city. Her office? The clients who assumed she was always within reach. I should go, she said. Sophie froze. Go where, she asked. Back to New York, Claire said gently. I have work, deadlines, people who count on me. Sophie's lower lip trembled. Will you come back? She whispered. Claire swallowed. I don't know, she said honestly. Sophie slid off her chair and disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she held something behind her back. Don't tell Daddy, she whispered to Claire, tugging at her coat pocket. Claire knelt. What is it, she asked. Sophie slipped a folded piece of paper into the pocket. It's for you, she said. I made it last night, so you remember you're in our story. Claire's throat closed. Thank you, she managed. That's a very important job. Sophie flung her arms around Claire's neck in a hug that was all elbows and conviction. You're my Christmas wish, she murmured. Claire blinked hard. Outside, Ethan had already brushed snow off the car and checked the engine. You should be fine now, he said. Just go slow. The roads are still slick. She stepped closer. That's really thoughtful, she said. He met her gaze. For a second, the world narrowed to the space between them and the soft sound of Sophie humming inside. If one day, he said quietly, you feel like reading the next chapter of last night, this place will always have a page waiting. She didn't know what to say, so she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. Then she got in the car and drove away slowly, carefully, watching the bookshop fade in her rearview mirror. In the upstairs window, a small figure in pink waved until the car was just another shape in the snow. At the first stoplight back on the highway, Claire remembered the weight in her coat pocket. She pulled it out. Another drawing. 3 figures under a tree. One small and pink. One tall with messy brown hair and kind eyes. One with golden waves in a bright red dress, holding both their hands. Her heart did something quiet and enormous at the same time. She had come looking for nothing. She had left carrying something she did not yet have words for. The city had not changed. The skyline still cut at the sky into shards of light. Her office still smelled faintly of espresso and printer ink. Her calendar still filled itself if she let it. Claire stepped back into her role like stepping into a tailored coat. Emails, meetings, site visits. But something in the lining had shifted. At night, in her apartment high above the noise, she hung Sophie's drawing between 2 framed prints by famous photographers. The expensive art looked colder beside the crayon lines. Nina noticed first. You're quieter, she said one afternoon as they sat in their favorite cafe near the office. Softer, even. I'm tired, Claire deflected. No, Nina said. You've done tired before. This is different. You've got that faraway look like you're somewhere else when you're here. Maybe I am, Claire admitted. She didn't say more. She didn't talk about snow or cocoa or how a one-night accident had felt more real than years of curated conversations. She buried herself in work. A week after New Year's, a package arrived on her desk. No return address. Her name written in steady, old-fashioned script. Her stomach fluttered. She opened it carefully. Inside lay her leather-bound book. The one she'd brought to the Hollow Bean. The one she thought she'd left on the mantel at Ward's Books and Brew. She lifted it out, inhaled. It smelled like coffee and wood smoke and something she now recognized as home. A cream-colored card stuck out between the pages. She unfolded it. Sometimes we spend years searching everywhere only to find what we needed when we finally stop looking. If you ever want to turn the page, you know where we are. No signature. None needed. Her mind flew backward to the café, to the red scarf, to the near miss, to the way Ethan had said I figured when she confessed. He had known. And instead of confronting her about it, instead of demanding anything, he'd sent her a story back. A beginning, and left the next chapter up to her. She sat there for a long time, the note in her lap, the city humming unseen outside the glass. For years, she had prided herself on knowing exactly what came next. The next project, the next hire, the next expansion. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure. She only knew one thing. She didn't want to keep reading alone. Winter deepened. Deadlines piled up. Claire met with clients whose apartments had better views than their relationships. She replaced cold light with warm, metal chairs with wood, glass with texture. She made rooms look like home for people who might never sit in them long enough to feel it. Each night, the drawing on her wall watched her brush her teeth, hang up her coat, eat solo dinners at a table that had never been set for two. One evening, she came home and didn't turn on the lights right away. The fire flickered in the corner, throwing soft shadows across the room. She curled on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, and stared at the framed drawing. 3 figures, one small, one tall, one in red. Her own reflection shimmered faintly on the glass beside them. Blonde hair, neat suit, tired eyes. "I'm tired of being alone," she told the empty room. The confession startled her. No investor pitch, no strategic framing, just a small, solid truth laid at her own feet. The next morning, she made coffee and didn't open her laptop. She stood at the kitchen counter for a long time, phone in hand. Then she opened a travel site, not for a flight, for something slower. Bus ticket, New York City to Maple Hollow. Departure Saturday, 6:00 a.m. She clicked confirm. No grand gesture, no comps, no overthinking, just a decision. That night, while she packed a small bag, her eyes landed again on the drawing. She reached out and touched the frame. "This isn't about fate," she murmured. "It's about being ready." She had built her life out of glass and steel, strong, impressive, untouchable. For the first time, she was choosing to step outside it. Not for fantasy, not for escape, for something real. Maple Hollow greeted her with rose-gold sky and curls of wood smoke rising from chimneys. Snow still clung to rooftops and tree branches, but not in the heavy, threatening way of a blizzard. It had settled into a soft blanket, the kind that makes sound thinner. Lanterns hung from shop windows, flickering. Somewhere down the street, faint Christmas music still played, leftover melodies not quite ready to say goodbye to the season. Claire stepped off the bus with a small bag in one hand and her heart in the other. She stood for a moment, breathing in the crisp air. Then she started walking. The town remembered her feet, or maybe she remembered its sidewalks. Either way, she found herself turning onto Maple Street without checking a map. Ward's Books and Brew came into view like something from someone else's dream. The windows glowed. Through the glass, she saw Ethan in a worn leather armchair, a book open in his hands. Sophie was curled beside him, listening intently, her pink dress now layered under a fuzzy cardigan. The fireplace flickered behind them. They were framed in gold. Claire froze. She held herself very still on the sidewalk, watching. Sophie saw her first. Her eyes widened. Her mouth formed a silent O. Then she jolted upright and scrambled off the chair. "Daddy! Daddy!" she shouted, already tugging at the door handle. "She's back. I told you she'd come back." The bell over the door clanged wildly as she flung it open. Cold air rushed in around Claire as a small body collided with her legs. "I knew it," Sophie said into her coat. Matter of fact, and Claire laughed, startled and breathless. Inside, Ethan stood slowly. He didn't smile right away. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, as if he had been waiting without letting himself say so. As if this moment had already lived 100 quiet lives in his mind. Claire stepped over the threshold. Snow clung to her hair, sparkling in the warm light. For a beat, none of them moved. Then she reached into her coat pocket. "I think," she said, "sure," her voice softer than she'd planned. "I forgot to return something." She held out a single white glove. It was the twin of the one Sophie had found on the cafe floor weeks ago, the one she had kept on her bedside table like a relic. Ethan's mouth curved. He reached into his own coat pocket, hanging on the hook by the counter, and pulled out the mate. Funny, he said. I was holding on to this in case its owner ever walked back through that door. They laughed. A little too much for 2 pieces of fabric. It wasn't about the gloves. It never had been. Sophie grabbed both of their hands and tugged. Now we match, she declared. They stood like that for a moment, 3 people, hand in hand, under the soft twinkle of the shop's lights. Claire turned to Ethan. I think I'm ready, she said quietly, to read the next part of this story. If you're still willing to write it with me. His fingers curled gently around hers. Then let's begin, he said. Chapter 1 of the new year together. Sophie beamed. I'm going to need more paper, she announced. In the corner, under the same mantle that had once held a drawing of 3 figures and a hope, a new picture waited to be taped up. This one had 4 people under the tree. A tall man, a small girl in pink, a woman in a red dress, and behind them, drawn lighter, almost transparent, but definitely there, a woman with brown hair and a smile. Who's that? Claire asked, pointing. Sophie leaned against her side. That's Mom. She said simply, she can stay in the picture too. Claire's eyes stung. She looked at Ethan. He nodded, his own gaze shining. Outside, snow spiraled down in soft, patient circles. Inside, the fire burned steady. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. A love that knew about loss and chose to risk anyway. A home stitched together from second chances and small, ordinary acts of care. A story that began quietly under falling snow in a glowing tree and kept going. One real, imperfect, beautiful page at a time. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or reminded you that there is still quiet magic left in the world, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support more soul-stirring stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care of your heart and keep believing in beautiful beginnings.